This piece is called Rabbiting on Bere Island in the 1940s and 50s. During the war, and for several years afterwards, rural Ireland had a lively rabbit industry. Millions of rabbits were exported to Britain every year. The market was there because at that time in Britain, meat was rationed, but rabbit meat wasn't. Also, there was a demand for rabbit skins. There's a book called The Rabbit Industry in Ireland, and it has a very interesting account of this industry. But listeners might be more interested to hear firsthand about the rabbit industry in Bere Island in the 1940s and 50s. So, Barry Hanley spoke by phone with the second oldest person living on the island. That's John Sullivan, John Eugie of Ardagh. John was born in 1935. The rabbits were plentiful there when he was a child.
They were taken around everywhere, that's it. We've got the road, the meadows and all, there would be nothing inside them sometimes with the rabbits. They were full of young nests of rabbits and everything.
When John and his brothers were old enough, they too went rabbiting, as it was called, to make a bit of money.
Oh, we sold them, yeah. There was no money for anything else. Last time they were buying, they were 4 shillings a piece, and that was great money, that, eh? So as good as £4 now, maybe more.
For comparison, islanders putting in the electricity poles in 1957, they got £5 a week. The simplest way for anyone to catch a rabbit was with a snare, and lots of children had rabbit snares. But the professionals, the teams of young men that were rabbiting, they used ferrets. You put the ferret in the entrance of a burrow, and then you set nets on all the possible exits and waited for the rabbit to be flushed out. The ferret had to be muzzled, otherwise it could kill the rabbit and feed on it, and then it might fall asleep, and then it mightn't come out for hours. John remembers one time he was ferreting.
I was with Brian Kay one time, that's a long time ago now. All Brian was interested wasn't girls. I just had him to watch there now the rabbits come out, and he was looking at some girl. Oh, there's a lovely girl. Oh, Christ, what a ferret. He was interested in it all.
If the ferret wouldn't come out, they might have to knock down the fence to get it out. John remembers that a team of rabbiters from the West End.
They were down my grandfather's and they knocked down some ditch and they were trying to, he said, knock it down, boys, all together. And I said, he's not to put back up now. He was very wicked kind of a man, like, you know, because you would destroy the fence, all right, like.
The high-tech method was called dazzling. John says that his brother Owen was great at the dazzling. They did this at night using powerful battery-operated torches. In John's words, the rabbits would run into you once they saw the light. When Owen was going to the tech, he used to stay in town during the week and he'd come home on weekends. John told us how Owen would walk to the West End on Monday mornings with a strap of rabbits on his back, and he'd go out and then he'd bring them up to Sheehan's, the buyers in town. In later years,
there was a fellow outside to bring him up, and then there was a lorry coming as well to come down to pontoon for him. You know, there was a bit of money in him, all right, like, because there was no other money there that time. They were putting them over to England as well. There was no meat there that time, to see, like there's no.
According to John, they got so scarce because everybody was after them.
They wasn't that dear first, like, but at the end, I think it was during the war, when the war was over, they went down in price in the end. They were gone out of the island, you know. So the last place we were west of the Corpy's place now, where they went on to us. We were west there.
Gee.
In the midst of the bloody night. If I was west there now, I'd fall into a hole right away.
John's brother Owen went off to Wales in 1956 when he was about 20. At that point anyway, the industry was in free fall all over Ireland. One of the reasons the market collapsed was because some Irish farmers took matters into their own hands. Even with the hunting, the rabbits were still increasing exponentially, as they say today, and destroying the grazing and the crops. 40 rabbits ate as much as one cow, and one doe could produce 6 litters or 60 young a year. Then her female offspring would themselves start to breed when they got to about 5 or 6 months. That's a very big R0 or R0 number. Or, to quote John,
they was pretty desperate to see.
Also, their droppings were everywhere, and they made the grass so sour that cattle and sheep wouldn't even graze it. And so the Irish farmers wanted the rabbits wiped out. In the 1930s already, the Australians had found that myxomatosis virus was a very efficient way to quickly kill off most of the rabbit population without harming other animals or people. It was first used in France in 1952. In 1953, farmers brought it into England against the wishes of their Ministry of Agriculture. And in 1954, the Irish Minister of Agriculture, James Dillon, he refused to grant an import license. He was afraid it might spread to the cattle and the sheep. But by later that same month, the Mixie, as it was called, was already in Carlow, Kildare and Wicklow. In his 2016 book, the author of the rabbit industry in Ireland, he names the farmers who secretly brought in the myxomatosis to Ireland. They had the skin of an infected rabbit sent to them in the post from the UK. Now, it's too bad that WHO didn't send this author to Wuhan to try and investigate where COVID-19 came from. We're still wondering about that. Anyway, from these 3 counties, the Mixie spread quickly, or rather it was helped to spread quickly to all corners of mainland Ireland. And it quickly killed off most of the rabbits and put a big damper on the rabbit meat industry. Rabbits are poor swimmers, and so for a few more years, Bere Island rabbits remained socially distanced and healthy. They had no natural predators such as foxes, and the rabbit industry was tainted and in free fall anyway, so the Bere Island rabbits continued to multiply exponentially. I myself remember in Clockland, a farmer there had planted a cash crop and was dreaming of a big return on his effort, only to have the rabbits wipe it out in a few days. John Sullivan has already mentioned the bare meadows, and Barry Hanley vividly remembers how the rabbits destroyed a field of oats that our father had planted. At that point, several Bere Island farmers decided they wouldn't take it anymore. They wouldn't let the rabbits eat them out of house and home. So they took drastic action. In 1957 or so, as best we can tell, they brought in several Mixie-infected rabbits. Those who were old enough at the time will never forget the Mixie, or the strong feelings on both sides. The people against it said that it was cruel and that it took away the livelihood of the rabbiters, and they also said it wouldn't work long term anyway, just like it hadn't in Australia. The Mixie spread very well on Bere Island, and it wiped out the lowland population, but it didn't reach the hill, so some survived. Charles Darwin would have predicted this survival of the fittest, I'm sure. The same thing happened in the Australia experiments as well. So indeed, the rabbits came back with a vengeance. By the 70s, there was a very large population again. Then, probably in the late 80s or early 90s, the Mixie was reintroduced, and then the population went way down again. But we can't credit just the Mixie for this. There was a sizable population of foxes in Bere Island in the 80s, and mink came in at some point as well. They may even still be there, and are probably keeping the numbers down. John doesn't think, or he's not sure it's the mink, and he has his own theory.
There's no rabbit now in places. They're on greens all right now, like, well, there's any dog there wouldn't be around that much at all.
But trying to balance nature and to respect the natural order while trying to make a living continues to be a challenge. And at a personal level, John, with his love of animals, he thinks back to those earlier times.
We used to enjoy hunting the rabbits, like, you know. And all it is, when I think to it now, if I caught a rabbit now, I'd feel after to kill him. Oh, the rabbit got us. I think we were cruel as well, like.
At the beginning, John's family didn't eat rabbits, but after that they did.
As son, he was over one time and he was saying something about rabbits. And he said, oh, I couldn't eat them. So my mother cooked a rabbit, and whatever way she cooked it, she gave it to him. God, he said, that's the nicest chicken I ever eaten. He said, John, I'm sorry, but it was a rabbit.
On Bere Island in the tough 1940s and 50s, rabbiting provided financial help for many families. And as John fondly remembers, it provided a lot of fun for the young men.
That time we were only teenagers. Huh? We never again see them days.
And this piece was put together by Séamus Hanley. It's based on Barry Hanley's phone interview on February 12th with John Sullivan. John and his family have approved it, and additional information was provided by Barry Sullivan and Timmy Hanley. The book that I referred to is called The Rabbit Industry in Ireland, written by Michael Conry, C-O-N-R-Y, and published in 2016.